Welcome to the Mega Man Battle Network 6 speedrunning tutorial. I'll be covering Gregar version. I may do Falzar at a later date, but for now it's just Gregar. The goal of this is for new runners, so there might be a few things missing, like more complicated strats. At least the explanations for such. I'll try my best to go over folder edits and probably even movement and stuff. So, we will be watching the segmented run today. Input display will be on so that you guys can see what I was pressing. Because this is a speedrunning tutorial, I'm not really going to go over any of the backstory or plot behind BN6. And it's also on the Japanese version. So I guess while we're doing this tutorial, because there's not a whole lot to talk about here, I'll explain why I run the Japanese version over the English version, and the pros and cons of each. So the Japanese version, all the time save is from text boxes. However, in Pavilion Comp 3 you can get a virus called a Nightmare, and it's only damageable by swords, and in my runs I don't have any swords in the folder whatsoever by then. So it's a bit of a problem, and the Japanese version has roughly a 4 or 9% chance. I forgot whether English is 21 or 25%. But I believe English has a 25% chance to get Nightmare, and Japanese is only a 17 point something % chance. So that's the main reason I'm staying on Japanese, but the text time save is a lot more consistent than anything that can happen in English. However, the one advantage the English version does have is that you can use a glitch called Slipwalk off of GMDs and BMDs, whereas in the Japanese version you will softlock if you pick up any items while using Slipwalk. So that glitch we can do in Japanese, but we have to use an NPC that doesn't give us an item, whereas English can just use whatever they feel like, more or less. That's only really relevant in one spot though, well, two spots, but one of them saves a lot more time than the other. However, the one that saves more time is also a lot more RNG. So that's the tutorial. There's not too much to explain, it's pretty straightforward if you watch it. Now we'll be regging Crackshot and reading email 2. Crackshot's very strong, it's a 60 damage star code chip. Only 4 megabytes, we can reg it right away. Let's see right there, land cut up before jacking in, and that's because of the way that movement works. This being an isometric game, it works out to be more horizontal distance than vertical distance, even in a technically square area. So we want to cut out horizontal movement as much as possible, and that's what that little cut up there was for. In the first area, Central Area 1, we need a reflector. It can be any code. A code is preferable. If you counter the Metars, you'll get a higher busting rank. Generally, if you get Metars and the chips to delete them in one turn, you will get an A code, which is what we want. Should go for the counters because we definitely want A code. You can get it at rank 10, but it's a lot less likely. It's 100% at S. In Central 2, you don't have to talk to the shop. You have to talk to everything else, but not the shop. Right there I ran from an encounter. That's something I did because it's a segmented run. Probably you're going to fight all your encounters. If you can't beat it in one turn, then I would try to run. And now we just have to go to the school. If you pay enough attention to the movement, you'll see little optimizations here and there. One of the other quirks of movement is that every time you change directions, you actually stop for a frame while you turn. So oftentimes we'll run in kind of a weird way to avoid turning an extra time. And that doesn't save nearly as much time as horizontal movement, but this is the fastest order to talk to everything in the classroom. You can, so anytime you talk to something that's not an NPC, you have a 3 or 4 frame window where you can turn to face away from it. And that's kind of important because sometimes you'll double talk to them if you're facing them. So one of the things I actually like for the tutorial about the segmented run is that it got kind of a bad draw for this fight. Ideally you'd get a sword counter hit 1, or both if you had a wide sword. Potentially they could both come to the front. Pick up 700 Zenny here. Yeah, but you would counter hit 1 with the sword and then use crack shot on the other. Typically, that's how most runs are gonna go. For this section, you can more or less talk them however you want. This is what the task does, so this is what I do. It's worth noting that the desks have really weird hitboxes, so... or not hitboxes, interaction boxes, I guess. Here we grab the copy bot, we have to grab this bucket off the guy's head, and we just run back to the classroom. Oh, I completely glossed over it, but the non-NPC wall that I talked to was actually the panel next to the camera, and that gave us a reg up 1. We'll be needing the reg ups later on to reg, first we're going to reg Reflector for the boss fight, as well as a couple fights in between the boss and the next boss. But later on we'll be regging copy damage, which is really, really important. I'll try to remember to point all those out. But yes, in classroom, when you're in the corner talking to Mick, you should pick up the reg up. So the gimmick for these comps is these firewalls. Occasionally it'll be better to dodge them, and that's for step counter reasons. But most of the time, this is actually really tight. I still can't believe I got that. That's the only time I've ever gotten that. You can dodge some of the walls depending on how they're angled towards you. It is random which direction they come from. So typically you would have gotten an encounter by now. 2 encounters happens a lot in this comp. Since this was segmented, I got pretty lucky and only got 1. Usually if you get 1 encounter, you would already have gotten it still. It would just be a little later than usual. I run from this, but if you get 2 viruses, you should probably fight it. In this comp, you have a 50% run rate until you pick up the HP memory, which is that BMD I just grabbed. We grabbed that to be able to sneak run in the central areas, and it's the only one that we pick up through the entire run. We are given 3 more in dialogue boxes and cutscenes that we can't avoid. So it's just kind of a bonus, but it's the only one we go out of our way for. And so in this comp, usually you'll get 1 encounter. I would say pretty much always you'll get 1 encounter. But there is a small possibility that you get none. This will be our second reg up. It's a reg up 2. If you're quick and grab it like that, where you run straight down and then just tap left when you're next to it, you can just barely squeeze out that firewall. And then when you interact with a program during a firewall, it actually removes it. So that's handy. So I went right up here, and that's because since this is segmented, I was going for no encounter. Usually it's better to go left first. If you get the encounter before you get to the split, always go left. You can try going right if you want a chance at skipping the encounter and you haven't had it yet. It takes pretty good movement to have much of a chance at skipping the encounter though. Normally you'd have 2 chips here, take out both the L code recovs. We leave the A codes in for later because they're null chips, and A code flows pretty well with the folder. If you have an excess of chips, you can start taking out swords or mini bomb Ls. Now, the Blast Man fight usually goes pretty well. This was a particularly good draw. Standing behind this cube forces him, so he'll move 4 times, and then on the 4th movement he'll use his attack wherever he is. You can stand behind this cube in the top corner, and as long as you're standing behind this, he will always do that fire tunnel attack, which is a free counter hit with the guard. Or reflector, sorry. Most of the time your fight will be 2 turns. If it goes well, of course. And that'll be Blast Man down. Usually that split will take you about, probably on average 12 to 13 minutes when you're starting out. Once you've gotten a couple runs, I mean, it might take as long as 14 or 15 the first time. So we cut up there again, just to save some horizontal movement when we talk to the bed afterwards. Usually you'll get an encounter on the way to here, but we can first turn escape all the time now. So if you do get an encounter on the way to buy your sneak runs, of which we get 3, just run from it right away. Doesn't matter if it's a GMD, it doesn't matter if it's only 2 Metzars. Just run from it. Here we'll be picking up our 3rd reg up, and that is a reg up 2. If you're completely unfamiliar, the thing we picked up from the ground back there was the key data to open this door up ahead. And the last BMD we grabbed was copy damage, which is a really, really important chip. Technically, the reg up and copy damage here, you run through that area a couple of times before you need to use either of them. So anytime this split, you can grab those, and it doesn't really save or lose time, as long as you're sneak running. I should probably point out that turning around when you interact with objects does not save any time at all. It's just something I try to do in my runs for swag. It's kind of fun. So here Mick has a penguin, and we have to figure out where to get fish for that penguin. Which takes us to the staff room to talk to the biology teacher, and he just told us to go to class 6-2 and talk to the biology teacher's aide, because their grandpa sells fish out next to the station. We'll be jacking into the 6-2 comp. There's another reg up in here that we need. Unfortunately, this is the most convenient time to grab it. We never actually enter this comp otherwise. And we don't actually come back to class 6-2 again either. So this is another fight where having Reflector on reg from the first folder edit really helps us. You pretty much always want the Piranha to go down because you'll one-shot the Starfish in the back, and then you can use your Crack Shot or whatever other chip on the Puffy in the top and charge shot the Piranha. That's the easiest way to one-turn this encounter, as long as you can take a chip as well as the crack shot. Or not the crack shot, sorry, the reflector. Sometimes the fight will go a little bit better, you won't have to buster or whatever. Most of the time it goes about as you just saw. Sometimes the piranha will troll you and refuse to go to the bottom. Or sometimes you could only be able to take the reflector and get a 2-turn fight. But that was about average of what normally happens there. You'll notice I didn't cut up here. That's because the next thing we'll be doing is not sleeping, it's going to be leaving. And it saves 1 turn for him to not cut up. If you do cut up, you basically don't lose time. So don't worry about it too much. If you don't have it memorized, you can just cut up every time. Or not at all, honestly. If you're starting out, then it doesn't matter too much, but it's a good habit to get into. Of course we'll sneak run here. And like I said before, if you forgot the HP memory or the copy damage, or both, the HP memory, the reg up, not the HP memory. If you forgot the reg up or the copy damage or both, you can grab them right here and it'll be fine. And we'll be running through this area again as well. So you have 3 chances to grab them. So this is why we call the bathroom splits fight. It's a Metzar with a plunger on its head. This fight can be a little bit obnoxious, but since we have reflector regged, as long as we get any damaging chip that we can take with reflector, we can clear it in 1 turn just like this. This does work even with air shot, but you'll want to buster the front Metzar twice first. It does not work with attack plus 10 or recov. It has to be a damaging chip, as you probably guess. It just needs to be an A-code cannon or a crack shot, pretty much, which is most of our folder. Well, not most of our folder, but there are enough things in there. So coming up here is the most important part of the run, especially when you're really grinding for times. To get to Seaside 2, and we don't have to go there yet, but we will later, and this is the only time we get encounters in this area. We'll be picking up, on average, 2 encounters here. And you want a chip called Train Arrow, and you want a chip called Train Arrow really bad. You need it to open the gate that lets you get into Seaside Area 2 later. And as you'll see shortly, it's not ideal to farm for it in Aquarium Comp. I say farm. It's not ideal to get encounters for it in Aquarium Comp. And you will definitely see why. This is definitely preferred to get it here. However, you don't have to worry about it a whole lot. When you're starting out, you'll be able to pick it up in Aquarium Comp and have a pretty easy time PBing still. And that'll be true for a long time, as long as you clean up other parts of the game. But when you're really grinding, like on the sub 215 grind, as Rish achieved recently, which was super impressive, as I'm currently working on, you kind of need to get it in Seaside. This game's really easy and fun and straightforward to run. It does get a little tedious when you get down to the really low times. But then again, resetting at 19 minutes isn't the worst thing in the world for a 3-hour, 2.5-hour RPG. Especially considering it's the only real reset point. There is RNG, but you can kind of mitigate most of it. So this will be the second folder edit. If you don't have Train Arrow yet, you can wait. What I'm doing here... Okay, yeah, you should write Crackshot on that folder edit. And you take out Minibomb L and Swords. I take them out in specific slots. The reason... I think I took out 2 Swords and a Minibomb L. I do that folder a little differently than... there. Rich does it completely different than me. I do it in kind of a unique way myself. But the gist of it is you want to take out Minibomb L and Swords. Probably Swords, mostly. Well, Minibomb L is a really bad code. Your preference between Swords and Minibomb L you should take out and put in copy damage, any train arrows you got, and potentially you could have gotten Mega Energy Bomb M from a in-battle Green Mystery Data in Seaside. That's also a really good chip against Diveman. So you can put that in there if you have it. And like I said, Crackshot is also pretty important. So the only thing you don't have to talk to in the aquarium section is the little pools with the jellyfish in them. Everything else you have to talk to, all the exhibits. I guess the bottom wall of the dolphins. You only have to talk to the little interactive speaker thing. Here we'll be picking up the last rig up in the run. This puts us at 12, which is exactly what we need to rig copy damage. There is one backup reg up if you missed a reg up 1 in the aquarium that you can pick up. I'll point that out when we pass by it. Since all we're doing is running around, this might be a good time to mention. I really should have done this at the start of the video. But I will have timestamps in the description for every split, each of the boss fights, and such. So you can kind of click around if you need something specific. Because there might be a bit of dead air while we're backtracking places and running around. This is stuff that I can't really give tips for, so... all I can really say is either have jot notes when you're starting out or just memorize it. And then, yeah. If you want to know how to optimize movement, maybe take a closer look, but that's about it. I will note, however, that this copybot cutscene does not put you in the copybot, and you will at some point run into the aquarium as Lamb. This happens to everyone. You will lose a run because of it, or at least a minute or two. Well, like 30 seconds probably. So, there's something I'm gonna have to explain in this comp, and you'll see that shortly. And it's not the sharks, but I will explain those when we pick up the first prog, or maybe the second if I'm not done with my first tangent. So right here, we switch to LAN, and that actually, the game doesn't track how many steps Mega Man's had when you leave the comp. So that's the same as if we jacked out and jacked back in, and it's reset our step counter. So we can abuse this to avoid literally every encounter in the aquarium comps. And that's why it's so important to get Train Arrow from Seaside 1, because it's our only real opportunity to get it without going out of our way for it. Technically, you don't lose that much time for getting it in Aquarium 1. If you don't get it from Seaside, and it's going to happen a lot, so this is important. Aquarium Comp 1 is the most likely area to get Train Arrow. Aquarium Comp 2 is the least likely, and I would probably skip it no matter what, even if you don't have Train Arrow. Aquarium Comp 3 is pretty decent, and then if you don't have it at all, you can farm for it with Heatman later, but you will be at the door, so that's all pure time loss. But if you're doing a race or a no reset run, it is something you can do if you get really unlucky. There are maps pinned in the Battle Network Discord for these. They're in hashtag BN strats. If you go to the Team BN Discord, you can find those, along with a bunch of other resources for the game and the series in general. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested and somehow have found this video before the Discord. The maps for these comps, they use a different route than I did because they were made by a different runner, a Japanese runner in fact. And he was the first runner to get sub 220 actually. But yeah, his maps show where to press L to switch to LAN. You'll get a feeling for it after a bunch of runs anyway, but it'll definitely help starting out. You'll notice too in this comp, we've already done it for the first prog and I was busy talking. But we walk for a brief period of time, and that's, if you go full tilt there, the sharks will tag you. So just pay attention to the movement patterns is all I really have to say for this. The routes I'm running work every time. That BMD, we could have picked that up right there, and that's the backup reg up 1. The sharks do freeze while you're interacting with mystery data. Oh, I didn't explain the sharks after. So the red sharks have a completely fixed pattern and move slightly faster. And then the gray, blue, navy sharks, they will attempt to follow Mega Man. But if you move the same way every time, they'll move the same way every time. So we don't really worry about them. Most of the time we just take the most direct path. Also, the order for the comps doesn't really matter. In fact, I believe the maps do some of the comps in a different order than I do. The way I routed these was basically do what the task does, but use L button strats, and then I switched it up a bit for step counter reasons. So I think what I do in this video is the best, most correct way, but there could be minor optimizations. Also, what I do in the second comp is probably a little bit risky. There's definitely a safer way to do that. I tried to cut out one of the L button rotations in the second comp, and I think I run across a couple of encounter checks, but they're all first checks. So if when we did the Navi Customizer tutorial, you didn't have a train arrow at the time, you probably didn't do a folder edit, and you would do it right here instead. You kind of have to do the folder edit here even if you don't have train arrow. So lobbed projectiles like mini bombs will actually hit Dive Man while he's underwater. The way his AI works, he'll move 3 times, or twice rather, and then surface, and has a random chance of attacking or not. And then the 4th time he surfaces, he'll always do that tidal wave. And I was really clever here. I tanked a torpedo to be able to counter hit the tidal wave with a sword. You can't consistently counter the tidal wave every time and plan for it, and that was a pretty good fight. Normally, fights that good, you'll have train arrow and get a counter hit from the tidal wave, and then he'll just be dead. The other thing Dive Man tries to do is he tries to never enter your row, but he will never backtrack unless the panels are cracked for some reason. Whether he moves forward or back if he's in the middle is random, I think. But you can kind of manipulate his AI a little bit to force him to the front or the back, or at least attempt to, based on where Mega Man's position is, because as long as he won't be backtracking, he will never enter your row. Also, it's not quite relevant right now, but the chip fire burn will also hit him when he's underwater for some reason. All we have right now is a little bit of running back and forth before we get to do the actual heat cross split. But here we are. Mr. Match will teach us how to use the powers of fire. So right here, in BN6, opening a menu and then exiting, you have to hit start and go into any menu, and then close out of it, is slightly faster than waiting for the security cube. There we bought 4 sneak runs, used 1. And these fights all work out super well. So we move up, counter hit the Metar, move straight down and hit A right away. Counter hit the second Metzar, and that also kills the kettle. All of this is done with just the regular chip and Fireman's heat press. And you need to keep full synchro through the whole place. You can usually back it up as long as you don't lose it on the third fight. If you lose full synchro on the third fight, you're in pretty big trouble. And you'll see why. These do all work out really nicely in the speedrun, once they're routed, you know? It's pretty satisfying. So this fight here, you could just step back to the back middle and wait for him to come to the very front to heat press. But you can also wait, and when he gets halfway between panels, you can step back, and then he'll still use the firearm in the middle instead of trying to chase you further. Now we have to switch to copy damage reg for the next fight. Very important you do so, because otherwise you're going to have a bad time. And if you don't have full synchro, you're also going to have a bad time. Because I didn't mention, but these kettles only take damage from fire. Heatman's Buster doesn't hit the back row, and it's actually kind of hard to buster them down anyway. So you would like to just copy damage heat press, trust me. For this fight, he moves a random number of times and then goes to the back middle to shoot an attack off. You want to counter him there. Ideally, you'll draw a train arrow here, and then he'll just die. A full synchro train arrow does... It'll leave him at 100 HP, so if you set up the full synchro with a crack shot, he'll have 40 left. That's 2 charge shots, because we have attack plus 10 on the Navicust. You can counter the follow-ups to his little fire wave thing. This fight's really cool. That pause there, so pausing doesn't stop the chip lockout, which is to say you can only use chips so fast, but you can overlap them if you pause and wait for the timer, and it makes it really easy to do the fight like that. This is about a second compared to other ways you can do it. And it looks really fancy. I'll have a more in-depth Heatman fight tutorial at some point, I'm sure. But for now, just know that you can counter all of his attacks, but the one where he makes fire from behind can only counter on the first part of the attack. When he moves and does it a second time, it's not counterable. And thus starts the Circus Man split. So here we're going to be picking up, after the cutscenes, we're going to be picking up our lotto codes. Do you have access to the lotto trader now? We only pick up 4 codes. You could pick up more if you're comfortable doing so. If you wanted to get more, we get Elm Trap, Mega Boomer, Buster Pack, and HP plus 400. We get all of these for specific reasons. M Boomer's super strong, Elm Trap's very strong. Obviously Buster Pack's insane. HP plus 400 is just so that we're healthy enough to do the run and don't have to worry about anything. Here I code sort, and I put them in slots 2 and 3, and that is for a reason, but don't worry too much about it. I meant attack sort. And then you also want to reg crack shot again on that folder edit. This Navicust is actually outdated, but you can do it this way. This is the way that lets you end up with no bugs, so there's that. You can alternatively put HP plus 400 at the top and bug Buster Pack, and skip the second expand memory. But I'd probably just recommend doing it this way for now. surprising number of people I see don't do this. You can just hold left to walk through that guy. He doesn't actually connect to the wall there. I guess I should talk about slots 2 and 3. So, putting things in... The way the chip shuffling works in Battle Network is it swaps 2 random chips, 30 times, I believe. So there's a decent chance, or at least a relatively not insignificant chance, that the chips don't get switched with anything at all. So there is a better chance of a chip staying where it is than moving to a specific slot. So and the reg chip gets swapped with the chip in slot 1. So basically slots 2 to 5 have a higher chance of being drawn than the rest of the folder on turn 1, and that's important to us. For this, we have 4 soul weapons. I call them sword, longsword, axe, and gun. They're actually called knife, sword, axe, and gun. There is a little thing where when you delete a ghost, you get this kind of long animation of it fading out, as you see here. But you can see just how much faster knocking it down 1 level is. So a lot of the times you'll see us intentionally avoid deleting 1 ghost, but set up another ghost and then delete them both at the same time. And that works out to be a little bit faster. The red ghosts take 1 hit to kill, yellow 2, blue 3, and if you ever hit one from behind, it's an insta-kill, no matter what its level is. However, of course, we have this all routed out, and there are maps available in the Speedrun Discord. Hashtag BN6. Believe they're pinned. So talk about BN strats for a second, actually. The pins there include a Google Drive from TTerraJ42. He has pretty much all of the resources for every game archived in there. You just have to spend a couple minutes navigating it to figure out where it's all at. Basically, it's a Google Doc, and then some of the links go to his Google Drive, and all the resources are there. BN6 practice save states, I think those are there. Don't quote me on that one, actually. The maps are there. I think there's some notes, although the BN6 notes are a little out of date. There are absolute tons of resources for 2 and 3, though. I would say those have the most, especially 3. Probably 4 has the least. I'll be trying my best to make sure 6 has everything it needs. So there are a few times throughout Battle Network 6 where Mega Man collapses, and you have to go use a Navi, one of your Link Navis, although we only get one in the speedrun. You have to go use Heatman specifically to save him. So I use the sneaker in a specific spot, right about here. At that line, you can see where Heatman's standing. That's to make it wear off in a specific section so that I can mash A without any repercussions. I hear a lot that people don't like these sections casually. I actually enjoyed them casually, but they're also really nice in this speedrun because they're just pure execution. There's no encounters. Just menuing execution. And they're a nice break. They break it up a little bit. It's very involved, but there's no RNG. So your sneak run would wear out right about here if you used it right away. But because I delayed it a little, it's going to wear out between this and the door. So I can just run upright mashing A and it'll cancel the sneak run text box as fast as possible. This is also where you would farm train arrow if you got really unlucky. Heatman can run from encounters here, so if there's no piranha you can just flee from battle. This is really fancy. Something the TAS did, and yeah, it's just cool. You can go kill something while the security cube opens. It's really nice. It's a cool little optimization. This is one of the spots where we could have just longsworded that guy, but we set him up to axe with the guy over there as well. That saves us a little bit of movement. As well as it makes the weapons line up different than longsword, which is nice. So here there's not really any convenient way to set that guy up, so we just do the longsword and delete him with these two. This one's a pretty obvious longsword. This is another situation where we could have just axed and then sworded, or daggered rather. But instead we gun and then axe, and that ends up being faster. This gauntlet fight is another one that we can do entirely with crackshot and heat press, and it feels really good to get this down. Generally, even if I draw like Elm Trap and stuff, I don't take it, just because I need the full synchro in case the draw is not perfect on the next fight. Sometimes I might play with M-Boomer or something, I guess. So there, I buster the Puffy to get it to attack sooner. You could just wait for the top Metar to move down and counter him. But the Puffy's slightly faster, although I'm not entirely sure the timing on it. When I tested it, and I tested this with a TAS, and it seemed impossible to miss it. But we have missed it in runs, and I don't know why. So, that said, even if you miss it, you just lose a couple seconds. It's not that bad. You do like 2 charge shots and it's still over. So this fight coming up for the heal water, we can do mostly with crackshot and heat press. If you don't get anything else to go with those 2 chips, the mock gunner in the back will be left with 20 hit points, and you have to either buster it down or wait for the gauge. However, if you get literally anything you can take with it, attack plus 10 works, and you just do this. Sometimes the Quake guy will be a jerk. But most of the time this will clear the whole encounter, and if it doesn't, you can just buster the Matar and it's fine. But yeah, if you draw anything that does at least 20 damage, and that does include attack plus 10 because you put it on the heat press and it gets doubled, then you can do that in one turn really fast. Whenever you're running through Central like this, you can get an encounter on the way. One encounter is not really worth a sneak run, so we don't use one there. But you can just run from it. Getting an encounter and then running from it costs about 7.5 seconds. So if you want a visual cue for this, you just wait for the crosshairs to appear and mash A. That's the crosshairs from the mock gun on the top and bottom rows. So this is where the lotto codes really pay off. You'll see just how much work we can do with Heat Cross and Buster Pack. Circus Man you might remember being a bit of a pain casually as well, if you've played this game casually. But nope, in the speedrun he's just this. As are most bosses, to be fair. About the only thing that can speed that up very much is M-Boomer, because you'll do double damage on the grass panels it sets. It makes that fight really, like, 3 seconds faster, I want to say. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's pretty significant. So sadly we don't have a sneak run here. But we only get up to 1 encounter anyway. That was weird. I don't know, just like skipped frames or something. Yeah, you just run to that guy. The Navi. Not a guy, it's a female Navi. You run to that Navi and talk to her. It has to be the yellow one, the one on the left. And that starts this section where we do the Pavilion Navi Operator Selection Test. Part 1. The first hint is like cyber seals. It's referring to the background of the seaside HP. If you struggle a lot, that BMD is a HP memory, so you could pick that up if health is a big issue for whatever reason. It shouldn't be though, you should be fine with the 500 or so that we have. It's worth noting for after you start, whenever you go to these from now on, you can talk to either of the Navis. It's only the first time in Central Area 1 where you have to talk specifically to the yellow one. This BMD is an unlocker. We'll be using that later to pick up Black Bomb, which is in green HP. A very strong chip, especially with Heat Cross. You do have to talk to that tank, because the hint for this one was, I'm always looking at crayfish. It won't let you jack into the security camera until you've done it. So they did just give us the Expo folder, which is the additional folder that you get that you can actually edit. We'll be doing that later. For now we have to take this quiz. 23312 is the answer. The quizzes are probably a good reason to start on English. I'm only on Japanese because that's what I have. And it's what I'm used to, so I didn't really consider that when I started this video. That quiz doesn't actually give us anything. It gives us a key item that has a lotto code that we don't use on it. But we need to do that to get another quiz to appear later. And the other quiz is very, very important. This is the Black Bomb F that we pick up, and here we'll be editing the folder. So at this point, what you want is you want to take out the rest of the swords, Mini Bomb L if you haven't already, any non-A code train arrows, and area grab. And you want to take out of the extra folder however many chips you need to replace those. And I would take Cannon B, Cannon Star, well, B or A, it doesn't matter. Cannon Star, the 2 double crack stars, and then Vulcans. As many as you need. Actually, no, only take the Cannon Star, because if you still have 4 cannons in your folder, you can only put 1 extra in. So only the Cannon Star we take. Cannon Star, 2 double cracks, and 3 Vulcans. And that's the most you can get out of the folder, which is 6 chips. But there's also Black Bomb, which is a 7th chip. So however many you need to take out minus 1 is what you need to take out of the extra folder, Expo folder. And then you want to write copy damage, and you want to make sure Black Bomb's in somewhere in slot 2 to 5. The BMD we just passed and ignored so rudely is a HP memory. Again, doesn't take much time to pick up. You can do it if you want the extra health. You'll start to see just how fast encounters are as well. Starting out, it's going to be a lot of reacting and figuring out how to do the encounters, but by the time you've done as many runs as me, you pretty much have it all muscle memory. You see the encounter, you see a chip draw, you know exactly what to do because you've done it before. Figuring out how to do every encounter in the fewest charge shots possible with just copy damage and heat cross helps a lot. Right now, we don't have a whole lot to explain. It's just a lot of running around. It's important in the Judgment split, though. When you're running through the school hallways, don't just hold straight down the whole time or you're going to walk into Dolphin. That's the fat guy holding fries. I wish I could say there's some elaborate backstory behind that, but it's literally what he's called in one of the request BBS missions in BN6. We call not running into him the Dolphin skip. It saves 2 turn frames, I believe. A little tiny bit of horizontal movement. You pass by a Dolphin twice, but there's also a third time you run through there. It's the first time, actually. There's a walking girl that you can't walk past if you just hold down either. Also, shoutouts to Ito with the most text boxes in the game. The walking girl, even though she's not Dolphin, is also Dolphin skip. It's a guilty by association kind of deal. The split really is a lot of back and forth between Central and Green area. So most of the time you might prefer to heat cross and copy damage with 2 charge shots. It's slightly faster to use Beast out that way, I think. Also, this is the closest you ever come to the 3000 Zenny. You don't really have to worry about picking that 3000 Zenny up. But if you want to, sure. It doesn't really, it probably just about breaks even to do what I'm gonna do with it. Do the turnaround swag talk every time there. The best. So you do have to talk to this door first, which is a little annoying. But then we just go ask our lawyer friends from earlier what the code to the door is. Or rather, the door gave us a hint, I think. That they tell us which passage the hint relates to. And the code is 153, as he told us. These comps are really, really short. Most of the time you'll get one encounter in the first, 2 encounters in the second, and 1 or 2 encounters in the third. The gimmick here is not walking back on the grass. It's more of a suggestion than a rule, but one we're happy to follow for most of the run. So the collision in here is a little weird as well. You'll notice it a lot when you're playing yourself, but the walls are a little strange. If you get super lost because you don't have this memorized yet, you can also actually hit the L button to take a look around the area. I believe that BMD is a reg up. One of them is, I'm not sure which. It's either that one or the one in this comp. It's either, it might be this one here actually, now that I think about it. I'm not certain. We don't need either in any case. I actually messed up there. And so I ended up taking Boomer first before the copy damage. But I just paused to give myself a little more time to use the copy damage. That is an expand mem. We do need to pick that one up. You might notice a problem here, but we're just going to step on the grass here. This was discovered by a runner called Lil Fat Kid. By accident, I might add. And then he named it the Celine Dion skip. Or at least someone named it the Celine Dion skip. Judge Man's really easy. He'll move twice and then either jump to the front to attack with the whip or use his books. He has a third attack, but you're not ever going to see it. Most of the time, you're not going to see any attacks, in fact. Judge Man is very, very easy. Judge Man is very much the boss that gets made fun of the most in BN6. So here we're supposed to go to Skytown for the first time, but instead we're going to take a detour to Seaside, and that's to do the second quiz that I mentioned earlier. It gives us a very, very powerful Navi customizer program, which does something that you might not expect it to. I do not have the numbers in order memorized for this quiz. And this quiz is the main reason I recommend starting on English. 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2. There we go. Play that back and write it down if you wish. The Navi Customizer program we get from that is called Slip Runner. You'll see what that does in a few moments. And then I will explain it more in detail. It also allows us to use the glitch that I mentioned earlier on, called Slip Walk. You won't see that for some time yet, though. So now we head to Skytown as intended. So you take another detour into this comp, and you saw there we slipped pretty fast and Mega Man did a weird animation. That is what Slip Runner does when you're on the net and moving. You can press B and you'll slip really quick into the nearest wall. Well, not the nearest wall, until you hit a wall. The item we picked up in there is Rush Food. If you didn't pick up the Zenny earlier, probably you're only going to buy 1. If you did pick up the Zenny earlier, you're going to buy 3. Whether you picked it up or not, it's going to cost about the same amount of time in the end. So, doesn't really matter. Picking up the Zenny potentially, I think, saves a couple seconds. Like, literally 1 or 2. I will admit that I usually don't do it, though. Here you'll see Slip in action a bit more. It's very cool. It's super fun to use. It's super fast. And when you're not pressing B to slip, you also have the auto run effect. And boy, let's talk about the auto run effect, because there's not too much to say in terms of tips in these encounters, at least that I remember. The auto run effect in Battle Network 5 and 6 is very powerful. In Battle Network 5, the program's literally just auto-run, and if you don't get the 8 bug frags to buy it, it's a reset, because that's how powerful the Navi Customizer program auto-run is. So what Battle Network is doing when it decides your encounter rate, whether you're walking or running, is not actually checking whether you're walking or running, it's checking whether you're holding B. So, what auto-run does is it lets you run without holding B, so you keep the walking encounter rate, which your step counter goes up faster when you run than when you walk, as you would naturally expect. But, turns out that you basically half your encounter rate if you move at running speed with the walking step counter. And then not to mention you can slip, and if you slip across multiple encounter checks, you still only get 1 when you hit the wall. Needless to say, you can't get an encounter mid-slip. So as it turns out, this program's not only a very fast movement option, it also severely decreases the number of encounters we get throughout the run. Which is really, really good. It's the single biggest time save in Battle Network 6, I would say. Maybe it might, the first rush food might come close. You'll see where we use that soon. These pulse bulbs, oh man, these pulse bulbs are a pain in the ass. You will come to hate these pulse bulbs very quickly. That's about as well as this encounter ever goes. These gauntlets are all fixed fights, as you'd assume. It's pretty much just memorizing which ones you can do with copy damage and heat cross, and which ones you'd rather have a chip draw to deal with. And then being able to react to that chip draw when you draw it. So this rush food right here saves so much time, so many encounters, so much walking. It's very, very good. You need to get 1 rush food. No matter how much Zenny you have, you will have enough for 1 rush food, even if you don't pick up the 3000 from the camera. And you need to get it. It's mandatory. So again, I did it that way so that I would definitely hit both. Use the boomer first, pause to wait for the chip delay, and then use copy damage before it hits the first guy. So you can see how the chip delay thing is pretty cool. Technically this isn't any faster than Black Bomb. Which I had as a draw. So you have noticed that we're using Beast out a little bit here. You really don't need to, but you're quick to react to it and know how. You can speed up some of the encounters with Beast out. There are a couple encounters that we basically always use Beast out in, but most of the time you should just heat cross. There's no delay looking at and thinking about chips or anything like that. You just heat cross copy damage. CM Boomer or Elm Trap or Black Bomb, take it. Copy damage is really nice for the Kragers, whatever the rock guys are called. Because it copies the exact damage that you deal to the enemy. So like for example in the previous encounter we hit a wood virus, so we dealt the double damage to the golem as well. That was a cool fight. Forgot about that. You can do that with copy damage into buster charges from heat cross. So probably don't try to do what I did. This fight's super cool. Snaps back. And yeah, copy damage ignores the armor on the Kragers. That's what I was trying to say. Man, I used a lot of Beast out in the segmented run. I guess because I have more time to think. Or rather, because I ran the gauntlets so much. So many times in a row. So if you bugged Buster Pack instead of HP 400, you would actually skip this comp. But if you're using the Navi Cust in this video, you need that expand mem. It gets rid of the HP bug in the Navi Customizer. Which is important, because if you keep the HP bug, you're probably going to die to Gregar. This is again another section where you could get an encounter here. Just costs about 7 seconds. Not a big deal, run away from it. So in Sky 1, typically you'll get 1 encounter with Heatman. If you're super unlucky, you could get 2 encounters. Most of the time, if you can't beat the encounter in 1 turn, you should run away. And if you can beat the encounter in 1 turn, you can just go ahead and fight it. Heatman doesn't have a 100% run rate here, but it's high enough that if you can't beat it in 1 turn, you should just go for it. So we actually duck into this comp here to reset the step counter with Heatman. You can actually get an encounter before the warp, but it makes it slightly less likely to get an encounter in this comp to do it. And you can still get one after as well, but it is slightly less likely. It's worth doing. Of course, if you get one before the warp, don't bother going into it. This is one of the few encounters in the game coming up here in this comp where it is never faster to do anything that isn't just copy damage charge shot. Just because it's 2 viruses. Actually, you don't even need the copy damage. Take that back. You just heat cross charge shot on Zoe. Every time. I literally can't see any way to possibly make that encounter faster. So this is the first encounter where you will pretty well always beast out. This run gets M-Boomer, so it doesn't. But you should beast out in this encounter. In that encounter, most of the time you'll beast out, step up, buster down all the bubbles, and then use null chip charge shots to delete the viruses. Because that starfish is very dangerous. This is another one where you'll beast out a lot of the time. So actually copy damage to that guy to make sure that he doesn't use his barrier. Or to make sure that if he does use his barrier, I can still hit him. He won't always have a barrier, it is a random chance, I believe. And for these two, most of the time you'll just heat cross. So with Black Bomb though, if you hit a virus, if you deal impact damage to a fire virus with Black Bomb, it'll detonate immediately. Otherwise it'll just drop as an obstacle and you'll have to hit it with a fire chip. Or in our case, our heat cross buster. And so here start the weather comps. So the gimmick in this comp is that we have to fly around on a cloud while dodging killer trolley typhoons. And we have to collect all the rainbow macaroni to force feed the typhoon Skittles and make them taste the rainbow. So I actually got really lucky in this run. You have to surround the typhoons. You hold A to make the rainbow trail, and you have to connect it to the end of the trail. It can't just be any random point in the middle. It has to be to the end. So don't hold A the whole time, just do it when you need to. I jacked out there because I didn't get an encounter, and I was basically guaranteed one on the way to the door. So jacking out saves one encounter, which is a little faster. It's like a decent amount faster, in fact. And all of the movement that I do in these comps is to minimize steps and make me as unlikely as possible to get an encounter. Although most of the time you will probably still get most of these encounters. Though you'll only get one per area. And actually it's pretty easy to avoid the one in comp 3. 2 is the hardest comp to avoid an encounter, and I believe it might be 1. I'm not completely certain on that. So comp 1 only has 1 typhoon, but comp 2 has 2. I YOLO really hard and get both. Usually you'll get 1 at a time. In fact, it's a little dangerous to try 2 most of the time. So this comp is routed really specifically to minimize encounters, or minimize steps anyway. You'll oftentimes still get 1 encounter. But that blue one we've passed twice, we want to get last, because if we do this, it doesn't have time to give us an encounter check before we slip back to the path. Unfortunately, it's not worth jacking out from this comp. Or we would do that. Instead, you take whatever the percent chance is there. The first check you'll get is when you hit the wall at the bottom of those stairs. The ramp, I guess, not really stairs. Element Man's really easy. He'll move 3 times and then do a thing. I think it's the 3rd time he'll try to do a form change, but he'll always go grass, which is a pretty bad idea because we're fire. So try not to counter hit his... If you can flinch him and prevent him from form changing, but you actually really want him to change, so just take your time, and it should go really quick. Here we have the Moonstone split. This is one of the splits with a lot more RNG, because there are a couple of times when you run through Undernet 1 and Sky 1 where you can get encounters, but you won't always get encounters. And I actually get encounters there less than... more often than not I will not get encounters, but you can lose a lot of time, and it's probably closer to 50-50. You do need to talk to both red punk navies, so don't forget the first one on the way. When talking to that guy, you can go through the back or the front. It's actually quicker to go through the back, even though it seems like it takes longer. We did time it in a task, and it is faster to take the back route. And I assume that's because there are 2 loading screens if you go through the courtroom. And then you just come to Seaside and talk to this NPC 3 times. She'll tell you that the password is money hats, or whatever it happens to be in Japanese. English, it's money hats. The reason I do so much walking again, instead of slipping, is just step counter optimization. Some areas it doesn't matter very much, like Sky Area 2, you can slip as much as you want and not really negatively impact your step counter. But in Sky 1 it's kind of important. Same in Under 1. And here also. Usually you won't get an encounter no matter how you move through this area. At least, well, you'll get exactly 1 encounter, I should say. And on the later visits you won't get any. So that's where English could potentially save time if it talked to that blue mystery data and slip-walked off that, which is a glitch we'll talk about later. Docking into that comp resets the step counter. So I didn't get an encounter here in the segmented run because it's segmented and I did it over and over until it happened. But you will, like 98% of the time, get an encounter in Undernet 2. In Japanese, it's a little more likely to avoid it in English if you know how to use slipwalk. So now we get to go back to AC/DC Town, finally, see all of our old friends. Ironically, we don't have to talk to any of our old friends, just the random NPCs around town. Dex, Yai, and Mail we don't have to talk to. Can slip here the first time because the warp will stop you. Because we have to talk to Roll. So here it gets a little weird. Alright, so after we talk to the gate, we have to go talk to the Shogi piece at Dex's space. If you get an encounter on the way here, just walk back to the gate and talk to the Brock. If you don't get an encounter on the way there, you have to jack out and go back through the comp the same way to get to the gate. And this is about exactly the same no matter what you get. So this RNG doesn't matter a whole lot. And then if you jacked out, from here you can walk. And if you didn't jack out, you should jack out now and then jack back in. And talk to Roll. and then you have to go all the way back through the comp. This is the first place we end up using Slipwalk. To do this, you have to slip towards an NPC and interact with them at roughly the same time, and then you'll get this effect. You have free movement while being in the slip run animation, and that means you can't get encounters while doing this. However, it'll end if you ever touch a wall, and you'll get one encounter check right there. Also worth noting, you have to hit B to cancel the effect here to slip into the warp, because if you touch a warp while slipwalking, the game will soft lock, and it's not a good time, trust me. Also, if you are playing on the Japanese version, the reason English can slipwalk off the BMD in Sky 2, I mentioned this earlier, but not Sky 2, Under 2, is that in the Japanese version, if you slipwalk off a BMD, you soft lock, because picking up an item during slipwalk will soft lock you in the Japanese version, but not in the English version. In the English version, it's completely safe. Only warps will soft lock you. So this time we don't have to run all the way. You won't very often get an encounter on this trip in Under 2. And this brings us to the refights with Blastman and Diveman. Blastman refight goes a little something like this. Remember earlier at the start of the run when I said Blastman's AI will make him always do the fire tunnel attack if you're standing directly behind a cube? Well, he always does the fire tunnel attack from as far forward as he can, so and for the Diveman fight, you want to clean out null chips, or any non-null chips or bad code flow on turn 1. And you might have also remembered that Fireburner can hit Diveman while he's underwater. Well, so can he Crossbuster. And then on turn 2 we want to Beast Out. If you didn't lose Heat Cross on turn 1, don't worry. You can still use it. If you get hit with an Aqua Chip while in Heat Beast, you won't lose Beast, you'll only lose the Cross, and Heat Beast does do a little more damage, so it is beneficial to keep it. Although the lockout is so long from the Heat Beast charge that you're gonna lose it pretty much no matter what once you use a Heat Beast charge. But still a little bit of extra damage. Sometimes, if on the first turn you just have like 4 null chips or 5 null chips, you can Beast Out turn 1, and that's faster than using Heat Cross at all. It's also worth noting that Vulcan 2 does more damage uncharged. And I think Double Crack does the same damage uncharged as it does when it's charged. Your charge shot, when you charge a null chip, you hit for 180. Or 90 times 2. And that's because we have our Buster's attack status 4. The reason why our Buster is capped in Heat Cross is because the number's capped at 130, and Heat Cross gives you +1 to Buster attack, which caps us off at the 5. In short, Buster Up won't work on Heat Cross or Heat Beast, but it will work on regular Beast for the chip charging. And for regular Beast, it'll boost you up 20 damage to an even 200. So this is where the number of rush food you picked up is going to matter. If you picked up 3 like I did in the segmented run, you'll go here and use this shortcut. If you only picked up the 1, then you'll just go around the normal way. And because this cutscene's so long, it works out to be about even. But you do use the shortcut twice. So in the underground areas, we'll be doing soul weapons again in Underground 1 and 2. And this is the same deal as last time. There are maps for them. It's just execution, memorization. Luckily, we don't ever have to deal with fights in the underground areas, because they really suck as Heat Man. They're not great as Mega Man, to be fair. And that last folder edit we did is the last one we do for the whole run, so our folder's not the best. Underground 2 happens to be the area that has the least soul weapons to spare. If you make any mistakes here, it's almost just as well to start the area completely over. Unless you're confident you can figure it out, but you have to do that on the fly. And I'll tell you right now, when we end this area, if you do it right, you have exactly 1 knife left over. Once you're finished with this area, it's time to fight G-Beast and Colonel, in that order. The G-Beast fight is one of the harder fights in the run because you do it as Heatman, and his buster's really bad, and our folder's not amazing as stated. G-Beast's AI will make him move 6 times in an attack, and you can only counter him if he does double claws. Whenever he attacks, he has about a 50% chance of doing either double claw or single claw, and then if he had hit you with the single claw, he'll do a gun. I have pretty good luck here. Usually you'll go for the counter hit anyway and just kind of pray it happens. Every 4th attack he will do a lightning ball, and if you're ready for it, you can always counter hit that pretty consistently. The Colonel fight I actually have a separate tutorial for that is on my channel that you can find pretty easily, and it explains the fight a lot more in depth, but for now we'll just say that if you only ever hit him from a panel where cross-div can hit you, then he won't ever break your panels, which is the important part. The video in question, though, explains how to do that AI loop where it locks him completely into cross-div. And Colonel's a really fun and consistent fight once you get the hang of it. He's kind of your reward for beating G-Beast. So the reason we go to AC/DC Town here is to set up this warp for later. This saves a bunch of time later, but it's more convenient to do now. Even though we have to go to Sky Area. And so G-Beast aside, this is probably the other hardest part in the game. There are a few fights that you have to do on the way to the Undernet BBS, which is in Undernet Area 2. Most of them are fine, but as you'll see, some of them are not quite as fine. So this next fight in particular might be the most dangerous fight in the game, and you should save before it pretty much 100% of the time, unless you're going for like literally world record attempts. You won't see how dangerous it is here because I get Element Trap, but trust me when I say this fight is very, very dangerous. If you don't get Element Trap or M-Boomer, you stand a pretty decent chance of dying in that fight. Luckily, these next two fights are completely fine, as were the first two. Even if the previous fight goes well, you could be left really low, so actually, when you buy the last 2 sneak runs as Heatman on the way to Underground, you could also pick up 1 or 2 full energies from the same subchip dealer. There are 1,000 each, and I think we have about 4k guaranteed, or 2 or 3k guaranteed at that point. Don't use Black Bomb there. just use Heat Cross and stand in the front middle and do charge shots until it's over. And then we have to read the top email here. Make sure it's the top one. And yeah, the full energies, if you buy 1 or 2, when you pick up the last 2 sneak runs, you can use one in the under BBS, potentially, if you get low enough to need one. And it could also be useful in Pavilion 4. And that's something to consider if you're a new runner. If you're doing world record attempts, probably not worth it. But if you want to definitely be sure that the run wins, you should consider picking them up. I'm very much used to not picking them up, so even in a marathon, chances are I won't do it. But I would still save before the Pulse Bulb double puffy fight in a marathon. So here, this is why we set the link to AC/DC. We have to invite all of our friends, but the way that we invite our friends from AC/DC is by talking to their navies on the net. And again, we'll cut up before jacking into the computer, because the next thing we do when we jack out is go to sleep. And this will be the second time that we use Slipwalk in the run, at least in the Japanese version. Set up Slipwalk on Protoman when we invite him, and then we go talk to the rest of our friends. There is a chance when you slip into Glide here that you'll get an encounter, so just be aware of that. Again, turning around on these things doesn't save any time. It's just for swag. Now in Pavilion Comp 1, this will be the third and final time we use the Slipwalk glitch, and we will be keeping it through the entire comp. In Japanese, you have to use this prog to set up Slipwalk, and he has a lot of dialogue. This is one of the spots that English saves a little bit of time because you can use a GMD further into the comp, and the GMDs spawn in fixed locations in these comps. So that's a consideration you could make when picking version again. And like always, if you touch any wall, Slipwalk is cancelled. This comp does actually take a little bit of practice. That GMD right there is the one where you can set up Slipwalk a lot faster in the English version. And in that case, you would do the comp in a different order as well. Of course, you would get this prog first in English after setting up Slipwalk. The order actually does not matter in the least in this comp. If anything, you definitely want to do this third one last, but the first two don't matter. Right here I wait. Okay. And also, if you lose Slipwalk on the last program, it doesn't really matter, because you just slip straight to this thing anyway and interact with it. Technically, you can get an encounter when you hit it before you interact with it, but it seems to never happen, so... And if you thought the last thing took practice, this takes a lot more practice, even just to get it once. Remember when I said backtracking on the grass was a suggestion? This trick is called gavel skip. It's quite difficult, it takes a lot of practice. It's very impressive to watch when you pull it off. And it is, most importantly, is very swag. But actually, most importantly, it saves about 20 seconds. You can completely avoid that, and the only repercussion is one single encounter. And to be fair, the 20 seconds is if you get a completely optimal encounter. It could save more than that. But since it's a comp of wood viruses, chances are 20 seconds is a good estimate. And so this is the comp that I mentioned way at the start in the version differences. You can get a nightmare virus in this comp. Currently there are no swords in my folder, so nightmare viruses are very, very bad. And our run rate is very, very low. So we have a really bad chance of escaping from them, and we have no chance of killing them. So I do everything in my power to not get an encounter here by minimizing steps. And if you don't get an encounter here, really lucky, jack the hell out, because you couldn't get one on the way to the boss. If you make it back to this platform and don't have an encounter, you jack out of this comp. You do not play with this comp. As I stated way at the start, 17% chance of getting a nightmare in the Japanese version, 25% in English. If you can get out of here with an encounter, you take it, no questions asked. Element Man's about the same as the first time, switches to grass first and gets bullied. M-Boomer helps. Setting grass panels turns out is really good when your Buster does 130 fire damage. That fire skip's a little tight, you might not get that all the time. So I beast out here because it worked out to be a little faster, I think, but it's probably about the same actually. There is a consistent strat to always do that in 2 charge shots with Heat Cross and copy damage. And I can do a separate tutorial video on just this comp if need be, as I can on anything else if anything's not covered and someone wants to know. Just let me know either through Discord, you can DM me, or you can message me in the Team BN channel, or you can comment here. I'll see it anywhere pretty much. That's how the fight looks with Black Bomb. You just copy damage the candle and then impact it with Black Bomb. The candles can't be hurt by fire damage, but Black Bomb will still do impact damage, and then the copy damage will kill it when the explosion kills the other viruses. You can do that fight with just copy damage and Heat Cross though. And this fight as well you can do with just copy damage and Heat Cross, although it's potentially a little dangerous, so if you're low on health, use a full energy here. Or if you didn't pick up full energy, just jack out in between, it's fine. Circus Man's the same as the last fight, just a little bit longer. The hands clap a little faster as well, and the tent comes down 3 times, as seen here. And now we're ready for the final fight, Gregar. I have a pretty good video explaining the Gregar fight, but I will try to explain the gist of it here as well. So ideally you will pick up Mega Boomer and some null chips. You will take Mega Boomer and copy damage just to burn it, as well as any other Starcode chips. Throw copy damage while Gregar is in the air. You bait the rocks so that you can cancel your Buster charge, and so that he falls onto the Buster Rake to double hit him, because Gregar has 2 hitboxes, but the Buster doesn't come out all at once. Throw another Buster Rake over him while he's invuln. On the second cycle, you cross cancel into Heat Beast, and you start heat charging him. I should have been standing at the top there, he'd actually be dead. But yeah, that is how you do Gregar. The Heat Beast Buster comes out all at once, so you don't have to do any weird timings to get double hits with that one like you do with Heat Cross. It works out very nicely. And that is Battle Network 6 Gregar. Again, if you have any further questions after watching this video, contact me in however, and I am happy to help. And good luck with your runs.